Glen Suitor. Well, you know what? Let's save the kick, the 1989, because I want to get into that, because I was all hyped up on that today until the trade went down. And today we find out where Vernon Adams Jr. is going to play tackle football next year. It's in Calgary. Was Calgary always the play? Were you slow playing us too? Did you know about this?
Well, oftentimes, Barney, if when we do our hits, if you read between the lines, you will know when I've been told that I'm not allowed to say anything. No, I'm not surprised at all. Not surprised at all with this.
I can't read between the lines when it comes to my wife and daughter, so I'm not reading between the lines with you either. I'm bad at that game.
I hear you. It gets you in trouble too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, so I'm not surprised about Calgary though, and I think even though the Lions weren't consulting with Vernon Adams on where he wanted to go in particular, I think it was well known that he did want to go to Calgary, or that would have been his first choice anyway, because he doesn't want to go too far away from the West Coast. He's a Washington guy, just down from Vancouver, so he's closer to home. More family and friends. He loves to bring in the receivers in the off season. Easier to do that from Calgary or Edmonton than it would have been from an Eastern team. So I think everybody involved here kind of got what they wanted. I mean, at the end of the day, the Lions are going in the direction of Nathan Rourke. And, they've talked about that in the media over the last couple of days, how, that we have to remember two things with Nathan. One is what he did in 22, and the other is what he's gone through in the last 8 months. And all the different rosters, all the different coordinators, all the different, two different leagues. There was a lot thrown at him. I'm not sure anyone would have fared much any better than he did. When his first game with the day practice was Winnipeg, and again, he has to go out and prove it. But that sort of sealed the deal for Vernon Adams, and now, we knew that he was going to be moved. There's no question. In fact, they announced it. Now, this matchup is an interesting one. Dave Dickenson, when you think of personality, you might think this could be oil and water a little bit with a freewheeling Vernon Adams, and that's kind of how I describe him sometimes. Dave is much more structured from that quarterback position. But Bo Baldwin can be the mediator. He can be the guy in between. And Bo Baldwin was VA's college coach. So, highly regards Vernon. In fact, I think I brought this up before, but I saw an article with Baldwin who said he had Matt Nichols, Michael Riley, Bo Levi Mitchell, and Vernon Adams. He coached all four of those guys. And he said the best one I had was Vernon Adams. And, and the one that he thought was most pro-ready. So, yeah, no, not surprised. I think, and, I was listening in earlier, and to your point, you guys discussed on draft picks that were part of this deal. Draft picks are gold if used properly. Now, that doesn't mean you're always going to get
in any sport.
Exactly. And in fact, if it's easy to cherry pick one or two guys, like, a first round pick in one league, a first round pick in this league, and one guy, I was listening to the discussion. It's an interesting one because it happens all the time. People say that all the time. Well, there's so much of a gamble in the CFL draft. Not necessarily. If you're drafting, the top athletes. I mean, the last couple of years, Sam Emelis was a top draft pick, first round draft pick. Keon Schaefer-Baker was a draft pick. Those are guys that can be lifers, that can be 1,000-yard, perennial 1,000-yard, Ray Elgard, Jeff Fairholm type guys. So that's how important those draft picks are in exchange for a starter like VA. They're crucial. Now, if you're comparing them to the NFL, yes, it's very different, but the NFL also protects the first 3 rounds, even if they're not better in training camp than players that walk on. I mean, how does that make any sense to anybody? So, and it happens constantly. So yeah, there is always some, I won't say guesswork, but there's always a little bit of gamble here and there with it when it comes to picking the best player. I mean, Tom Brady was the sixth round draft pick. We've told that story many a times. How many quarterbacks were picked before Tom Brady was picked? It's crazy.
Was it 8?
How much of a crapshoot it can be. It was 4 or 5, I think.
I think it was more than that. No, I think it's quite a quick. Kellen's going to look it up here. I think we should know that as Patriot fans too, Kellen. But I'm throwing the stab in the dark 8. But was there no one else in play? Oh, Alan's saying 6 before Brady. Okay. Yeah. Was there do you think there was anyone else in play here, especially because probably no one from the East, right? Because I understand that he wants to be in the West, but I don't know, unless how much do you want to play him again? Was Calgary the only team in play here, do you think, Glenn?
I don't think he was the only team that they probably talked to. I would suggest that Hamilton probably kicked the tires.
Yeah.
Ottawa was probably interested to hear, what it might cost. But, we talked last week about giving up the fact that they're going to trade him, like just eliminating all of the, the speculation. And, is that do you lose some of your edge in negotiations there? And I said no at that time because everybody knew that they were going to trade Vernon Adams, and it depends on how many teams are really willing to go all out to get him, and that could be 2 or 3 draft picks. 2 or 3 draft picks is big. I mean, you could really build your Canadian roster if you get lucky in some of those drafts. So I'm not suggesting that Hamilton or in Edmonton even talking to them would be curious as well. We're saying, hey, we're willing to do the same in the draft pick department to make this deal happen. Calgary would have been. So, I think to answer your question, Calgary was definitely the front runner and definitely the team that made the most sense for everybody involved. But there was probably 3 other teams, maybe 4, that were just saying, what would it cost? How much are we looking at? I mean, listen, I would have done it no matter what team I'm on. I would have made the call to BC, and I would have said, hey, what are you guys talking about? What are you thinking about?
For sure.
Why wouldn't you make that call to make sure you understand all the, the nuance of the deal?
It's like having an open house and saying, no, I only want one person to come through.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know, right? It's, and then you brought it up. Because the one thing, and I don't know the league inside and out like you do, but Dave Dickinson does seem more structured. And, that is the thing where I'm curious to see how this plays out. Because when you look at the list, and he hasn't played on a lot of teams, but he started in BC, went to Montreal, went to Saskatchewan, went to Hamilton, never played, went to Montreal again, then BC, now Calgary. The guy's been around, right? And we all think that Dickinson is probably on a short leash here, so it's going to be very interesting how that shakes down between those two.
It is, and I think with Dave pulling the trigger on this deal, that tells you a lot about how he wants to work with Vernon Adams. But when you think about the teams that he's been on, you could take a look at this past season. And really, it surmises maybe Vernon Adams' career in a lot of ways. A really hot start in those first 5 or 6 games, big numbers, slinging it just like a cowboy slinging it around the yard, and then he gets that Calgary game against one of the teams. Let's be honest, one of the worst teams in the league at the time. He was playing against the Calgary Stampeders, and he just doesn't look like he's seeing the field at all. And I've said it many times, I am a big fan of Vernon Adams because of how he conducts himself as a leader. His skill level is excellent. But it's been a bit of a roller coaster in his career at times. It was this past season. And, that's one of the reasons that they're moving him. So, I know what you're saying, and I think it's legit. But you brought up your wife, Barney, and I'm going to bring her up again, because I'm sure because for me anyway, with my wife, I'm sure there's lots of opposites attract kind of thing going on. Like, she's really, really cool, and we're not. You know what I mean? Like, there's
Well,
there's lots of opposite attract kind of things that happen in life where it really works when someone is completely different than the other person. And maybe Dave Dickinson and Vernon Adams can be that kind of combination.
Suits, Kellen here. While we don't know for sure that there was other teams sort of kicking the tires, do you think this is the first domino that falls in the quarterback room across the CFL, and by VA making the move over to Calgary, some of those other teams now are going to pivot to make other decisions on quarterbacks?
Yeah, I think a big one, like VA was a trade, so they could, discuss and talk once the season was over, and that didn't have to sort of wait till free agency. There's still, quarterbacks that are going to become free agents is a different piece, and Trey Ford comes to mind there, which and Trey Ford's story and how that unfolds in the next two meetings is going to be interesting when it comes to the hiring of a head coach in Edmonton, which that Ed Hervey would like to get to sooner rather than later. These things are happening very quickly. Staffs are being built. We're hearing rumors of Brent Monson going to the Argos. If that's true, and why would they be doing that with Kevin Ivan and William Field being such a great combination in their defensive room last year? One of the reasons they won the Cup was because of how good their defense played. Why would they want to make that change? Unless they know that Kevin Ivan might be one of the candidates that some of the other teams are wanting to talk to. So there's a lot of dominoes to fall, to your point. And, I think Trey Ford is a major one. Davis Alexander, but those are free agency deals too. And some teams might wait till February, see if, what the price tag might be for some of these guys once they become free agents.
Is there any precedent in the CFL, like we see sometimes in leagues like the NHL, where we might see a trade of a player who's going to be a free agent for like a very deep draft pick or something, just to give some negotiating time? Have you ever seen that, or is there something we can expect to see with any of these guys?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can do it. Like, teams will make a trade to get that 2-month negotiation window open and say, if we can make a deal, the trade goes through. If we can't make a deal, it doesn't. I've even seen that happen. So, I think that's possible. And, but again, you go through the teams. The Edmonton Elks is an interesting one. That's a discussion. I mean, that's another whole topic when it brings in the head coaching candidates and Trey Ford's situation. Nathan Rourke's in Vancouver. Now VA's in Calgary. And, you go to Winnipeg, and if they make a change in Winnipeg, they're nuts. If they take Zach Collaros because of a Grey Cup game and a wrecked finger and say, maybe we should move on, that would just be crazy. And I think Bo is going to be in Hamilton. You can go down the list. I mean, teams are pretty good with where they're at. Now, Davis Alexander is interesting with Cody Fajardo in Montreal. But, yeah, those type of trades can happen to get some negotiation time with the player. I'm not sure they'll happen here unless it's a David Alexander and Cody Fajardo situation, possibly there.
Okay, I want to save the coaching questions for Thursday, and I want to get. This is hard to believe that it was this long ago, and that you guys played the Grey Cup on November 26th.
Look at the old masks.
Okay, what are you saying to him there? What did you say to him there?
Well, we were telling little stories to each other throughout the process, and that shot caught the end of the little discussion, which we had all the time whenever it was a big kick. Dave wanted to talk about something other than the kick, other than the thing. And what you don't see too is that all of the offensive linemen wanted to be kicker coaches at that time and turn around and tell Dave in the huddle, you got to keep your head down and make sure you follow through. And I'm like, get up there, get away from my guy. And you can see the blocking was outstanding up front. I get nervous whenever I see a replay of that. I honestly do. And watching it right now, I feel like I'm starting to sweat.
It is like John Gregory. Like I said earlier, that's where they got to bring back that sweater as a retro sweater in the team store, because that thing is iconic. Because everybody remembers the kick, then they remember Gregory, right? Who was like everyone kind of seemed like everyone's dad.
Yeah,
like
I love it.
Who was the snapper?
Bob Pulley.
Pulley.
Yeah.
Because the thing that people don't remember, and you guys were, it was in the brand new Sky Dome. There was a lot of different things probably for a kicker to get, to get accustomed to, right? I don't know what the turf was like, but it was in an old stadium, the sight lines. It's like when you're golfing too, right? Like, okay, well, you got to take it over there. You got to, like, there was different things in the end zone. It was a brand new facility. So when you hold that ball, because I've always said it takes the snap, it takes the hold, then it takes the kick, like the Vinatieri kicks for the Patriots, all that, right? That year, did you ever muff any of those?
In my career as a holder, I dropped two. One slipped through my hands in Calgary, and I had to chase it. Got just crushed by a big 240-pound guy who ran over me as we both went after the loose ball. So that was a good lesson to learn. Like, don't drop it because you get blown up. And the other one was in Saskatchewan when Ridgway was going for a record in points in a single season. And this was I think it might have even been a convert. And if he makes this convert, he gets the record for points in a single season. And I dropped it. And there was about, 2.5 minutes left in the game. And I'm going, oh my God, I just cost my buddy a record in the league, and I just felt awful. And then we went out and they fumbled, and we got a turnover, lined up and kicked a field goal with no time left, and he got the record anyway. And I just, to get that turnover was just like such a relief. So those were the two I dropped. But believe me, that one in I've watched it over and over again, and that one in '89. And by the way, 23 years between the one before that, the championship in Saskatchewan before '89. 23 years had gone by. And 11 of those, we didn't even make the playoffs. Like, I wasn't there for all 11, but I got enough to know that wasn't fun. And so, just for perspective, that if you're a young kid or a young family and your team gets to a championship, man, soak in every second as a fan. Enjoy it, love it, because it's not guaranteed, and it could be a long wait till the next one. 23 years between that one and '89, 66 and '89, and then from '89 to '07, what was that? Almost 20 years. That was 18 years. So, like, those whole families are grown and born. Oh. Guys are born and become fans and leave to go on to college by that time.
Cities have come and gone. What are you going through there? Because there's a lot of pressure for Dave, and then you talked about dropping those two, and the key one were the point. Like, what's going through your mind there? Are you like, okay, hands can't be sweaty, or are you just so in the moment that you're just execute this?
Yeah, it happens because of repetition.
Yeah.
And those were hours and hours and hours spent. Just Bob Pulley, Dave Ridgway, and I, after practice, before practice, hours and many, many kicks, and just getting into an automatic mode. Now, it just turned out in that particular kick in '89, they called a timeout to try and ice Dave. I went to talk to John Gregory, talk to him. He wanted to do something we called, which was a snap down, which meant I would shout out a signal and the O-line would kind of lift up and then go down into a 3-point stance. And the idea there was that we draw them offside, and if we miss the kick, that we'd get another chance because they'd be offside. So he brought that up. He said, let's do that. And I said, no, he's going to make it. Let's just go kick it and make it. So I had a good discussion with the coach there. And, I'll give him a lot of credit for trusting me in that moment to, just put all our confidence in Dave and just say, he's not going to miss, coach. Like, he's not going to miss. Let's go. We win the game right here. So I had that on my mind. Then I ran out, and that's when all the O-line were coaching Dave up and saying, keep your head down and all this stuff. I think Poley was in the middle of that with his crooked finger going, you better do, like this kind of thing. And so I was backing them off. So by the time I kneeled down and talked to Dave and we had kind of settled in, keep in mind, this is only happening over a couple of minutes. I didn't really have a chance to be nervous. I have been really nervous every time I see it in replay since then. But I in the moment, it was the reps kicked in. It was the automatic sort of way that the three of us worked together, how good Bob Poley was at snapping the football. My God, he was so precise. And I've said this many times, and I know fans have heard it, but if we were in practice, he could change the position of the ball. We're 7 yards away, change the position of the ball and get the lace right where I wanted it every snap after that. So he'd say, where's the lace? I'd say 3 o'clock. He'd say, okay. He'd make an adjustment. And from then on, it was right at noon where I needed it. And so I didn't have to spin the ball. I mean, he was that precise. I've said it many times. He's probably going, yes, it was me. The poster should have said the snap, not the kick. He said that many times. But, I watch it and get nervous, Barney, and I looked and I caught the middle of the ball. Like, on every hold, it happens so quickly. It happens within 2 seconds. That the ball leaves Poley's hands and then is kicked. That happens within 2 seconds, like 1.7 seconds. And I catch the ball 99% of the time at the front tip, put it down with both hands, making sure that it hits the tee, because back then we had tees, and then moving my right hand out of the way just as he's kicking it. So there takes a ton of trust there. So Dave can go. He can start moving forward before I have even caught the football. He's probably stepping forward in his kicking motion. He has to trust that it's going to be where it's supposed to be. And so I'd catch the front of the ball. But if you really slow this down, and I caught the middle of it on this one, and that scares the you-know-what out of me, because I think the reason I did is because I was looking at the goalposts as I was putting the ball down to see if we made the kick. And that is a huge faux pas for a holder. You have to get your head down and be looking at the ball. See how quickly I snapped my head up? That was too fast, because the ball could slide off the tee if you don't keep your eye on it all the time. So I've gone through that thing so many times thinking, had I dropped that one right there, how different would my life have been from that moment?
Oh, yeah. We wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be doing this.
Probably not doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the left hash more comfortable for him? Was the right hash? Was the middle? Like, where did he like to kick? Do you remember?
Dave was solid from anywhere. Everywhere, honestly. Yeah. And that's back when the hash marks were further apart too. Mm. And honestly, that was what, a 42-yarder, I believe, 43-yarder, right? 42-yarder.
35 on the stat sheet.
35. Right. So we were kicking it from. Yeah. The ball was on the 35, so we were kicking it from the 42. So from there, with the pressure of the moment, and I've said this about kickers when I'm in the booth, the goalposts shrink. You know, when you're dealing with that pressure as a kicker, those goalposts start to come together, and they honestly feel like you're looking at a postage stamp. Now, a postage stamp for the young kids that weren't born in 1989, that's what we used to put on letters. You don't do that anymore. But think about
they're on strike anyway.
they're on strike. They're on strike anyway. But you know, I honestly, the pressure of the moment will cause those things to look like they're almost side by side, and that's what kickers deal with. Kickers don't deal with the physical challenges of the game, as you know, like a linebacker would or an old lineman, but they deal with the mental challenge, as much pressure as a quarterback when it comes to those huge kicks. Ask Brett Lawther about it one day when you have him on, because that pressure is unbelievable.
Okay, we got 30 seconds. The last thing. What time did you go to bed? Or did you go to bed? And when was it, the next day? How was that party?
Well, that was November 26th. And I went to bed somewhere around Christmas Eve, I think.
Why wouldn't a guy? Yeah.
Yeah. So somewhere around then. And man, were the fans, that was for the fans. That year, after 23 years of drought and not being back and all the great support we had, we were so proud to bring it back to Taylor Field.
You weren't supposed to win in Edmonton. That's 9 years old. I remember more from the Edmonton game than the Grey Cup, because my dad was like die hard, and that you guys, go in there and upset them. That was amazing. The boys are telling me we got a break. We got Thursday coming up. Glenn, thanks so much for reliving that. It was a blast, and we'll talk to you Thursday.
Yeah, and you are cool. Don't get me wrong. I was just messing with you.
Well, nah. Verdict's out. And it's at this point in my life, I don't care anyway. See you, buddy. We'll talk to him Thursday. It is press coverage with Glen Suitor for Quality Tire, 9 locations across Saskatchewan. We'll be right back. You're watching the Sports Cage, streaming at sportscage.com.